Hi there everybody, Urban Brawl here, brand new YouTuber extraordinaire, here to talk about Marxism and film and hopefully not put you to sleep. I am an undergraduate student at a nameless university studying urban studies and geography as a double major. I love cities, I love movies, I love learning about how people move, and I love learning about how policy can enact real social change if harnessed effectively. That's my deal. Got it? Cool. Anyway, let me lay out the foundation for this video, a video essay on Haine. I've been trying to think of a way to articulate my love for this movie for months, but every attempt has left me wanting. It's a film that came to me at a very important time in my life when I was getting into punk and hip-hop, and these were two genres that I had rarely broached before, as they were both fairly intimidating and kind of monolithic genres to get into. But when I did, oh boy, there was an air of resistance in my mind now, understanding through the words of Pat the Bunny and Nas that the status quo was not to be accepted. I was at Vortex Records nearly every day at that point, a historic and beloved record shop in Toronto up at Yonge and Eglinton. It was home, and I loved it. One day on one of my daily haunts of the place, I came across the Criterion Collection DVD shelf they had, and saw the words Haine plastered across a DVD spine in crude black spray paint. I picked it up and immediately bought it. I talked to the clerk about it, and he was talking to me about the film like the enthusiastic old man from Page Masters.
Of course, you're a boy who loves adventure.
Underrated gem, by the way. I went home, watched the Jodie Foster introduction, which I always thought was weird. Why did they pick Jodie Foster of all people? There's a million people they could have interviewed. Whatever, it was a good interview. Which gave me a good intro as to what I was going to be seeing throughout the film. The film ended, and within a week, my friend and I were planning a film-focused trip to Paris, which ended up being one of the most enriching experiences that I've ever had traveling. Before we start the essay, I don't really want to go into why I love this film so much and why it's maintained its value through time, as I will be explaining that throughout the video most assuredly. However, I think that this film is nearly perfect, that being a subjective opinion, of course. The music, the camera work, the grit, the writing and acting, the story, all of it stands on its own in perpetuity and has been a significant influence on the genre of the French extremity and crime dramas, allowing us intimate insight into the lives of the beleaguered project dwellers and how stigmatization and territorialization manifest in their lives socially and materially.
La cité des Muguets a vécu cette nuit au rythme des émeutes jusqu'au milieu de la nuit. Une centaine de jeunes a littéralement assiégé le commissariat de police qui se trouve au milieu de la cité. Les batailles rangées ont fait 14 blessés du côté des forces de l'ordre. 33 émeutiers ont été arrêtés. Les casseurs ont fini par saccager une partie du centre commercial ainsi que quelques bâtiments avant de se disperser à 4 heures ce matin. Ces émeutes font suite à la bavure d'un des inspecteurs du commissariat des Muguets. Il y a 2 jours, il avait sévèrement blessé un jeune de la cité pendant une garde à vue. L'inspecteur a été démis de ses fonctions, mais Abdel Isha est toujours en observation à l'hôpital Saint-Georges, où son état est jugé grave par les médecins.
Haine is a film that takes place over a single day, beginning with the violent arrest of the 3 protagonists' friend, Abdul. The friends make their way through both the Banois and Paris, resisting all modes of authority through their personalized methods. Vince through violence, Hubert through fiscal security, and Saeed through discourse. There is no explicit objective of this film's narrative other than the collective goal of escape from the beleaguered housing projects, all of the characters fumbling helplessly towards that release. The film revolves around the presence of a gun, which is shown in a Chekhovian way early in the film in order to establish the precariously violent nature of the environment. A gun which a police officer had lost during the chaos of the protests the night before, that Vince unfortunately found. Vince, upon his friend's inevitable demise, the friend in a coma for 2/3 of the film, is hell-bent on the idea of murdering an officer in cold blood as an act of resistance. Frustrated and intellectually ill-equipped to deal with the nuance of this socio-political positionality, he turns to violence as a way to enact change within his space and escape from the conditions of his material reality. After a day in Paris consisting of crashing an art gallery, stealing a car, watching Muay Thai fights, and being tortured by police officers, the group runs into a squad of skinheads, and Vince is provided an opportunity to murder one of them in an act of revenge for their friend Abdul's death, the skinhead played by Cassavetes, the director of the film. With the gun he had been proudly brandishing the entire film pressed against the head of the man, he realizes that he is unwilling and or unable to pull the trigger, and they let the bloodied neo-Nazi go. The group retreats back to the Bonui, wherein they are approached by a hot-headed, plainclothes officer who accidentally kills Vince and presumably Hubert in front of Saïd, likely radicalizing him.
C'est l'histoire d'une société qui tombe et qui, au fur et à mesure de sa chute, se répète sans cesse pour se rassurer. Jusqu'ici, tout va bien. Jusqu'ici, tout va bien. Jusqu'ici, tout va bien. L'important, c'est pas la chute. C'est l'atterrissage.
The ending of the film echoes the conversation that Vince and Hubert had on a roof the previous night about the man falling from the skyscraper, muttering to himself, "So far, so good. So far, so good." As Hubert says, it's all about how you land. Key scene. I believe the scene most key to Haine's thesis is that which takes place in a bathroom while the trio is visiting Paris to collect a debt. Saïd is trying to get a hold of the person who owes him money. Vince is yelling at Hubert about how much he wants to smoke a police officer with his acquired gun, trying to enact change through violence. Hubert, trying to rationalize with him, explaining how hatred breeds hatred, likely a platitude taught to him in school that he would blindly follow. All of a sudden, a man emerges from the stall, oral witness to this whole conversation, and begins to tell a story of his friend. I'll let him do the talking.
Tu peux niquer ta mère et puis c'est tout, alors tu me laisses, vas-y, bouge. Hé, de quoi tu parles, frère Collet? Tu viens de braquer un truc avec un plein de flics, tu aurais pu te faire tuer nous aussi.
Ça fait vraiment du bien de chier un coup. Vous croyez en Dieu? Il ne faut pas se demander si on croit en Dieu, mais si Dieu croit en nous. J'avais un ami qui s'appelait Grunwaldski. On était déportés ensemble en Sibérie. Quand on va en Sibérie, dans les camps de travail, on voyage dans le train à bestiaux qui traverse la steppe glacée pendant des journées entières sans croiser personne. On se tient chaud ensemble. Mais le problème, c'est que pour se soulager, pour chier, c'est pas possible dans un wagon. Et le seul moment où on s'arrêtait, c'était pour mettre l'eau dans la locomotive. Mais Grunwaldski était très pris. Même quand nous devions nous laver ensemble, il était très gêné. Et moi, je me moquais souvent de lui à cause de ça. Donc, le train s'arrête et tout le monde en profite pour aller chier derrière le wagon. Et moi, j'ai tellement embêté Grunwaldski avec ça. Il préférait aller un peu plus loin. Donc, le train repart, tout le monde y sort dedans, car le train, il n'attend pas. Le problème, c'est que Grunwaldski s'est éloigné derrière un buisson, il n'avait pas fini de chier. Alors, je le vois, il sort de derrière le buisson, en tenant son pantalon dans sa main, pour ne pas qu'il tombe. Il a essayé d'attraper le train. Je lui tends la main. Mais chaque fois, quand il me tend les siennes, il lâche son pantalon, il tombe sur ses chevilles. Il remonte ses pantalons. il reprend sa course. Et chaque fois, son pantalon il tombe quand il me tend la main.
Et alors, après, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
Rien. Lunvansky, il mort de froid. Au revoir. Au revoir.
Pourquoi il nous a raconté ça?
I believe this story is allegorical for marginalized populations, reaching out for help through the few methods available to them, trying to catch up with the increasing pace of modernity, but persistently hindered by the condition of their material reality and the policies which hinder their respective socioeconomic emancipation under a neoliberal framework. Portrayals of the urban. Just as a precursor to this section briefly, I wanted to bring you guys up to speed as to where I got the inspiration to make this video essay or review. And it came from a course that I took in my studies called Cities in Film, where I was taught by a great professor about the importance of this film that I had seen previously, but I had never really understood to be an academic film necessarily, and that really just broadened my perspective on the whole thing. And during that time, we were assigned 2 readings that were specifically made for Haine. And I think, considering the tone that I've set throughout this video to be at least slightly academic, I feel like it would be beneficial to explore these papers a little bit just through this next section and kind of understand where the academic world stands with this film, how it's respected in with respect to urban studies and geography, and just what kind of impact it had on the cultural milieu and discourse surrounding public housing projects, suburban developments, and uneven developments across the board. Great, let's go. Paris and its ennui are represented in a very cold and realistic way, juxtaposing the hegemonic representation of the city in popular media, often seen in a magical, Eurocentric light. Cassavetes has taken note from the French New Wave and Italian neo-realist genres, taking advantage of the mise-en-scene of the city rather than relying on faux in-studio recreations of the spaces. Both the city of Paris and its ennui are spaces of alienation and turmoil, characterized by anomie and political violence, ushered in by regressive policymaking and the police force's new managerial tactics following suit with New York City and its police commissioner's employment of the broken window theory. I believe the monochrome aesthetic is meant to illustrate this condition and how such a theory asserts the relationship between residents of the ennui and its police are a binary interaction. However, all of the characters exist within the gradient between. The director pays careful attention to the built environment he is attempting to illustrate, portraying the alienation one might feel due to the sprawling urban design of the ennui, and more broadly, suburbs in general, through the use of negative space and scale, as seen in the images seen on the screen now. This is an alienation that is felt despite deep community ties and active social life, displaying the fact that the built form of this space is negatively impacting the stigmatized population. However, the built form and lack of social support systems are determined by governance. Therefore, these conditions have been facilitated by the neoliberalization of the global north as governments cut the programs which help direct these disenfranchised projects in the name of populism. This built form and its associated alienation are contrasted to the chaotic and exclusionary nature of the bourgeois Paris, wherein these effects manifest socially rather than through the methods just discussed. I feel like an ant in intergalactic space, says Vins. Paris is not portrayed as it normally is in film, as hegemonic representations of the city are usually romanticized to placate North America's propensity for wanderlust. Think rain, warm street lamps, bustling cafes. Think midnight in Paris. I feel that despite the film's roots in the French New Wave and the New Extremity, this film more so fits the archetype of the Italian neo-realist film, echoing the urban chaos and anomie found in films such as The Bicycle Thieves or Rome Open City. The characters in these films are similarly thrown into the thralls of poverty, violence, and alienation through no fault of their own, the characters being as resourceful and efficient as they can be to their respective personas, in order to change the condition of their lived experience. I've included these two clips that I'm going to put beside each other, La Haine and Midnight in Paris, just to compare the portrayals of Paris. I picked Midnight in Paris, directed by Woody Allen specifically, because often he's historically omitted socioeconomic themes from his oeuvre, and focusing more on the banal philosophical pontifications of the bourgeois in a power fantasy rather than addressing the severe uneven development present in the urban settings of many of his films, chiefly New York City, like Manhattan and Annie Hall. I feel as if Midnight in Paris is the absolute antithesis to La Haine, obfuscating centuries of social and political struggle born from the marginalization of classed, racialized, and gendered demographics, in order to perpetuate an image of a clean, just, and magical city, rather than the spatially contested urban landscape of both the Bon Nuit and Paris. I believe that a comparative analysis between these two films would be valuable to the discourse of urban representations in popular media, especially regarding Paris, providing a visual reference point of the perspective of the flaneur tourist versus that of an actual resident. Might be a project for the future. Now guys, I'm going to be frank with you here. I wrote this for a class. And that class required me to connect this film to a few pieces of course material. And I feel like that would kind of ground my review in the academic literature. So I feel like it's a good inclusion, even though I know a lot of people probably won't have read these articles, but I think that it's still worth including. So my next section is going to be connections to course material. This film is explicitly tied to course material of the assigned articles that make mention of La Haine, one dedicating the entire article to the film, speaking to its discursive power in regards to the French Bon Nuit. Both of these articles provide context for the social stigmatization and alienation that residents of the Bon Nuit experience, largely focusing on the social and material landscape of these spaces and how they are policed. The more generalized article, written by Garbin and Millington, speaks to the stigmatization felt by residents of the Bon Nuit and its prototypes, or bidonvilles, or shanty towns, built by Algerian, Portuguese, and Spanish immigrants out of necessity due to housing shortages. Drawing on primary qualitative data, the research purports that residents are aware of how the stigmatization of the marginalized has been territorialized to the Bon Nuit or the Parisian suburbs. However, I believe there is another layer of research to be uncovered. During a scene where the trio is harangued by a journalist, Vince hurls a rock at the journalist, one of the trio screaming, "This ain't Thoiry." This is indicative of another layer of territorial stigmatization within the Bon Nuit community, displaying a lack of solidarity within associated projects and asserting a socioeconomic superiority of one Bon Nuit over another, despite their seemingly similar goals for an improvement of the ways in which the government interfaces with these spaces. As Garbin and Millington note, social oppositions objectified in physical spaces are reproduced in thought and language as categories of perception. This claim is further supported by Lefebvre's theories of conceived space. The space of capital, ideology, power, and knowledge are embedded in representations of space, and the objective expression being Bon Nuit tower developments, resistant to the hegemonic, Eurocentric French positionality. The article written by Siciliano is an interesting read, examining the post-colonial conditions of France which have inspired the creation of La Haine. Aptly, the author explains how the lack of an explicit address on some issues of ethnicity in the film are born from the multi-ethnic landscape of the Banlieue, as opposed to an omittance of those social dynamics, which are obviously very important to the social makeup of the Banlieue. However, I believe the author has missed an integral piece of evidence in regards to that point, and that would be the use of racial epithets. Said calls Vince an epithet for a Jewish person, then just as freely calls the owner of a bodega an epithet for East Asian people. I believe this is indicative of Said trying to subvert his own racialized marginalization by participating in the thoughts that perpetuate that marginalization, thus bringing those who he is interacting with to the level of the stigmatization that Said experiences. On a broader scale, these interactions provide an intimate portrait of the racial dynamics at play within the Banlieue. Quoting Siciliano, conventional acts of racialization are reconfigured in the new socio-spatial terms onto the Banlieues and youth. These interactions add to the discourse of marginalization found in La Haine and would have found a valuable place within this article. Lastly, I would like to note that while Siciliano criticizes the omittance of issues of gender in the film, she herself does not address this subject outside of one paltry footnote. I believe that the lack of discourse on gender in the film speaks just as loudly as if the film were to have shown an explicitly problematic representation of women in the Banlieue. Therefore, this article needs deeper analysis in order to provide a comprehensive portrait of the Banlieue's social landscape. Conclusions. La Haine is a film that has left an impact on both film and urban studies, illuminating the othered's life experience through an intimate and bombastic display of Paris and its Banlieue. The film's choice and exploration of subject matter in this context is limited in regards to discourse on gender. However, I believe it provides valuable secondary evidence to the conditions of the Banlieue and how they fostered the political turbulence spoken of in the articles explored. The film not only retains its cultural and political importance through the continued peripheralization, marginalization, and stigmatization experienced by the urban poor in the global north, but is an artifact when explored as it allows the observer context regarding the socio-political landscape which has facilitated such urban processes seen in the Banlieue. Just to end off the video, I'd like to thank everybody for watching. If you've watched it all the way through, if you haven't, thank you. I appreciate you. I'd like to thank the professor that inspired this video essay review, Ryan James. He's a great professor, and I really appreciate him and all that he did in the class. And I am excited to continue making more of these video essay review type things in the future. I'm not totally sure about what my format will be, but it'll be something, and I'm planning on doing it. So look out, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, throw a comment down there, let me know what you thought, and I hope you all have a great day. Peace.